Hello and
Hey,
welcome. How's it going, David? Thank you for being here.
LETTERHACK, the one and only. Good to be here.
Well, for now, yeah.
For nah, irreplaceable. There's certain people that you just can't replace.
Well, that's so nice of you to say. um, I'll hang my hat on that for now. Multimedia producer, multiple online media outlets, for multiple
Oh, now you're
media
building my
out.
resume, blowing it up.
I mean, it's the truth. Like you've done this for more than one show, and I'm not sure all online media producers can say that, but you're best known for the Benjamin P. Dixon show, and like it or not, everyone watching knows who you are. You've been requested.
They know my name at least. Oh, I've been requested. All right, all
Yeah.
right.
See? Uh it's David Grossman. David, thanks for being here. You're in the hot seat tonight. How's it feel?
I'm gonna start sweating pretty soon, and I
Well,
don't have any hair, so it's problematic.
well, just so you know, I was gonna do like uh producer month, right? And I had like 12 different invites out, rejected across the board.
All
Nobody.
reject. Yeah, no, we don't. We
They
like to stay behind the scenes, but
Yeah, that's what I'm finding.
carved out your little space, and everybody knows you, and I know that I think everybody from Like It or Not's been on that. I think all three hosts have been on, so I was like,
Yes.
I owe it to Matt. So
Well,
yeah,
thank
no,
you. I really do
it's out of my
appreciate it.
comfort zone for sure, but so I definitely understand why everybody rejected, right?
Well,
Everybody declined, but
and so that's the thing is like it's out of everyone's comfort zone because how many shows are interview slash I'm gonna draw you, right?
I don't mind being drawn. That part doesn't, my
Well, what
face
if
is
I
already out
screw
there.
up?
It's not my art.
Okay. Oh, good point. Good
We'll
point.
get to that a little later because what we do actually connects to like I drew as a kid, so I get
Oh,
it.
oh, cool. Okay. Oh, I'd love to hear about that. But so for now, I'm in the hot seat with you because I'm gonna watch you watch me draw you. So it could be potentially awkward for both of us.
That I know the feeling.
While I get in on the drawing, like I said, my regular viewers know who you are. But in a world where we only consume more and more online media, I think
Uh,
it's vital to know how it's produced and who's producing it behind the scenes.
so
Um,
you want me to give all the secrets away, so that
well,
so I don't have any new jobs in the future? No, okay.
yeah, and if you don't with this first question, I have a bunch of questions that could lead you to do that. But start out by telling us what what's your origin story? How'd you get into this line of work and producing in the first place?
Yeah, that just a whole bunch of random steps, which probably goes for most people in the space, at least if they didn't go to school for anything in the realm. Um, I knew I wanted to be involved in politics, like to the extent of activism and just being involved. I couldn't really turn a blind eye. Um, I was nowhere close to like where I am now in my like positions or beliefs or anything like that. It's definitely all been a collective journey, no pun intended. Um, but I had just been kind of forming my awareness of things, and I had hesitated for using Twitter, which in retrospect I probably should have stuck to that hesitation, except it wouldn't have led me to anything. I was hesitant, and I actually signed up for Twitter to help a friend with she was getting into writing a book, and she needed some help with like getting word out and different things. And I just, it was inevitable that I was going to end up getting pulled into the political spaces of Twitter just because of, my interest in everything. And I came across Benjamin Dixon. And this was before, I don't know, he was doing some video, but he was mostly just doing the podcast. If anybody watching that knows the Orange Room, it was during the Orange Room days. So I came across one of his episodes, and I heard that he was working on different projects. This was before the Progressive Army website actually popped up, and this will age me. So some of the people in the chat probably know about Progressive Army, and if you do, that's how far back this goes. Before, right around the time Bernie Sanders announced his run, maybe a little after 2015. And so he basically put a call out, like, if you want to be involved in things, if you want to write, or if you want to help, like, form, some kind of media collective, reach out. And I did. He asked me what I wanted to do, and I really had absolutely no idea. And it kind of just like was a matter of people like just doing what they could. I don't know if she's in. I know Jamie Pixie on the Moon was gonna be in the chat. That she responded on Twitter today, yesterday. So she actually worked with us on Progressive Army. So she definitely can put all the pieces together. And if I lie, she can tell you. If I say something, if I try to make myself look too good. But yeah, no, we had this blog, Progressive Army. There was some video editing at that point, but the focus was more on like a activism, journalistic type of thing. It was sort of a I don't want to say radical because it really wasn't, but it was sort of like a real version of Daily Costs. I don't know if it's Costs or Coast because I really never used it, but we had some writers from there that actually decided they were not going to write for that outlet at all, or blog really. So they had started to come over to us and others, just trying to keep writing and get their name out there. And we tried to build it, and it lasted for a good while. There's some people that wrote for us back then that have since blown up and created their own brands. But after a while, if there's not investment in something financially, as we know in the indie space, it's really hard to keep going. It's really hard to keep afloat. And politics, as much as every year is an election year, when it comes to like awareness in the masses, it becomes cyclical. So things started to dry up, and real life took over. And I still worked with Ben on and off, like just on various projects, but things kind of flew to the wayside. And then the pandemic came, and that's what kind of brought everyone back together slowly but surely. And like I said, I had done some video work during the Progressive Army days, but I didn't really sharpen my skills until a few years later, right before the pandemic, around the pandemic, when I started to reconsider things. And the pandemic just created an opportunity. And I hate to say that because a lot of people suffered during the pandemic. The pandemic was it was bad times, and it still is. There's a lot of people still dealing with with long COVID and just ramifications of things, things that happened in life because of the pandemic. So I don't want to like make it seem too good, but things kind of just came into place. We started we started a show virtually rather than having a physical studio. And yeah, things have just slowly but surely, I've had other projects, and it's a grind, just like any freelance type of work is, which you can probably speak for as well. Um, but I kind of just wanted to try to carve out a lane where I could focus on what I felt was important while also, living.
So let me get this right. You didn't set out to be a producer. You did it because there was a need for it in your efforts to be involved.
It started that way, but it turned out that that was definitely more to my like my interests and my strengths than writing or anything like that would have been. So, like I said, Progressive Army had been a blog, and I am glad that my writing is probably not locatable anymore. But the production space was definitely more my league. So at first, I would never have thought that it would be something that I'd want to do, or like it just wouldn't have occurred to me. Not that I would have been like, I'm not into it. It just wouldn't have been something that I would have, thought about. Ironically enough, at one point when I was thinking about going to school, I thought about journalism. So things kind of are intertwined. And like I mentioned earlier, as a kid and even now, sometimes I'll draw. So I think the graphic art aspect of production, in terms of like the graphics and photoshopping and any of the design aspects, kind of plays into it too.
You do all that?
Yeah. I mean, not
Okay.
on every project that I do, but I definitely, but that is one of, one of the aspects, whether it be
So
audio, video, graphics. Yeah.
let's stick to like it or not then. Are you doing all those graphics?
Are you talking about like the pictures that you see for the like when we're like of the host and everything?
Yeah,
Yeah, that was all
backgrounds,
me.
thumbnails,
Yeah, for the most
social
part.
media.
Social media, we kind of mix. There's one or two other people that sometimes help out. Ben's nephew, when he's available, will help sometimes. But yeah, no, most of the graphics are me.
I didn't know that. That's fascinating because you do. I was already impressed. Now I'm like doubly impressed. So, okay, so this is really interesting to me because as you know, like you've been really cool to me when I've said, "Hey, what do you think about this kind of mic? What do you use for a stand?" And you've always given me great advice. Was that trial and error for you? Because I'm figuring this out as I go, and I have no idea. It's like, oh, I guess the thumbnail should be this size. Let me see. Yeah, that looks right. My
So a
font
lot
should
of
be
it is
smaller. I don't know.
it's a mix of trial and error and research. I know that like I school wise, I know that they teach certain courses. I know like Rebecca, even I didn't even know she went to school for new media until you interviewed her, Rebecca Azor. I knew she went to school for journalism. I didn't know about the latter part that she had explained. So I know that they're carving out a lot of those courses and a lot of that education. But I think especially in the virtual online space, a lot of it's still kind of like it's messy, right? It's not organized. A lot of things were forced through the pandemic. Before the pandemic, you for the most part would have been expected to have some kind of studio space. People, they relied on Skype and Zoom in mainstream media just when they absolutely had to, for the most part, or someone couldn't, wasn't in town or something like that. I like Democracy Now. I don't think they really did much interview if the person wasn't in their studio space. Now it's very rare that you actually have someone in the Democracy Now studio. At least as much as I watch it, I think I've only seen one or two that they've done since the pandemic where people were in the studio. So I think a lot of it's still evolving. But yeah, a lot of it's research and just trial by error. When you asked me about the mic, I've had to read up plenty on mics and you know what mics are best for a given environment. They and podcasting mics, fortunately, were already a thing before the pandemic. Fortunately, like podcasts and streaming audio and video had already that wasn't just birthing. So fortunately, some of the tools were available. Other things had to kind of be stitched together. I know StreamYard blew up because of the pandemic. So
You
yeah,
know,
a lot of it's just experience, just going through the motions.
every industry I've been in, restaurant, screen print,
Mhm,
embroidery,
mhm.
landscaping, even, there's always been trade magazines. And it
Mm,
was people's experiences, the
mhm.
newest technology. You get the production side, the design side, the marketing side. I could really use a reference like that for
Yeah.
this. Otherwise, every time I watch a show, I'm like, what kind of mic do they have? I'm
Yep.
not even listening half the time anymore. It's like,
I
hmm,
think YouTube has taken the place of the trade magazine, at least for
yeah,
this type of thing, because I mean, it doesn't have to be YouTube. It can be a blog or what have you. YouTube is probably just the go-to for, you know, searching video form of Googling, right? So if you want to, check out reviews on an item or find out what people are, say is best, and compare, you don't have to go to the store and buy the Rode mic versus the Shure mic. You want to like just open up a video or read what people found. I think that in that sense, those magazines have definitely turned into like YouTube reviews or that sort of thing. And without those, I would be lost.
so what you must have like at least a short list of things that you wish were better. Like, not in a negative
Oh yeah.
way, but like, "Oh, this should be improved. This should be standardized. We should all be doing this the same way."
You really wanted me to give
What's
my secrets away.
well,
No, it's
not
okay.
if
It's all
it's,
good. It's all good. It's all good.
you know,
I'm
if
just
it
giving
if
you a
it
hard time.
if it's trade worthy, not a trade secret though. You
No,
know
it's
what I
yeah.
mean? Like what give us like your top 2 or and maybe even 1.
My biggest complaint would probably be the ease of not ease because it doesn't have to be user friendly, but making technology work for the virtual space. So even before we went live, I was having problems where for some reason it never does this. I use Chrome every day and I use StreamYard every week, and it never tells me my mic and camera aren't working, and I had to restart because it wasn't recognizing anything. So it's bigger than that though. There are more industrial versions of softwares that studios will use, the CNNs, MSNBCs, whomever, even Democracy Now. So that they'll use like professional industrial software that's made for studio spaces. At home, we've started to have like certain interfaces. There was already OBS, which is free, and there's Streamlabs, which ties into OBS now. And I think I could be wrong, but I think that's thanks mostly to Twitch actually. And then StreamYard, I get the feeling StreamYard was more in the realm of, and I don't want to put the chat to sleep, so I won't, drag on about this type of thing, but because this can be boring. But I think StreamYard was more up like meant for meetings almost, or presentations, almost like webinars, sort of like I can't think, is it Microsoft Teams? I think is Microsoft's product. I'm not sure, but I don't think they were meant necessarily for streaming, amateur or indie programming. But I think that, but the feeling that I get is that the more people started to subscribe and look for the tool set, StreamYard's come a long way since we started using it. A lot of the capabilities that are there now were either like very, very, I guess raggedy, like they weren't smooth, or didn't exist at all, and they had to like add in updates capabilities for certain things that StreamYard does now. So I would say the biggest thing, and it's not just one thing, there's probably a lot of different aspects that I could think of, is just making things work and being able to present well so that it doesn't look like you're just like roughing it and trying to stitch things together, but it actually looks cohesive and looks like a solid product.
Yeah, I was using Streamlabs and I wanted to start doing interviews and I couldn't figure it out. I switched over to StreamYards and it's like you're my 53rd interview since then. So I'm
Nice.
sticking with this
You got
just because,
you have a catalog. Nice. I
yeah.
might have to go. I've watched a couple, but I'm gonna have to go back and binge.
Well, look at the clips playlist. That's the easiest way.
Gotcha. Do you
And
do all the clip work yourself?
yeah,
I
yeah.
know the feeling. Trust me,
I
and that's why you'll notice that like on Ben's channel, which is for the most part where Like It or Not right now, is just because we've had issues with Like It or Not's YouTube, and Google and YouTube just having they're difficult sometimes to let you work. So everything's for the most part on Ben's channel, and our output varies because small team.
mhm.
You gotta do the best you can.
Yeah, I mean, I've learned more through mistakes than intentionally trying to achieve something in Premiere or on YouTube or whatever. But what's your typical I want to know what you're doing before, during, and after the show. But like, what's
Mm.
the typical process like before you go live? How long are you, sitting down ready to rock and or preparing or and is there, I always want to know from people who do this, is there a limit to the amount of time you're willing to dedicate versus the length of the show, right? Like if it's a 1-hour show, are you
Mhm.
working for 4 hours or are you like, I work for 30 minutes for a 1-hour show and that's that. And I'm just pulling numbers out of thin air, but
Yeah, no,
what's it like before you go live?
it depends. So we can stick with Like It or Not just because that's what probably most of the viewers know of, and it's a good example. And it has varied in itself because if you remember back when things were really like closed down, or at least like there was a lot of unknown around the pandemic and people were still at home, and we had that. It wasn't an hour back then, it was 2.5 3 hours, I think, actually, because it wasn't just Like It or Not, right? It was the DJ had like breaks. It was Ben, it was Like It or Not, and we had Georgia Fort with us
Right.
at that point, so she had her half hour, and then we had an after show. So there was a lot more work at that point. That was hours at night for the most part, because when you have a morning show, unless you're going to wake up at 3 or 4 a.m., most of the work's going to be done the night before, barring breaking news, which is definitely the sticky point, especially when you're doing live stuff and you're dealing with news. You're not dealing with, you're not just talking pop culture, which things do trend, but it's still, a lot of it's evergreen, right?
Yeah.
On the news, right now, every single hour, Israel can be changing, so you'll have steady months where nothing is really like breaking, or I don't want to say exciting, but like constantly moving and unknown, and things are getting dry, and you'll be like, I wish things were busier. And then when things get busy, you really don't want them to be busy anymore. Like right
Right.
now, I wish what is going on in the Middle East wasn't, and I think we all do. It's there's so much to report on, but it's things that we don't want to have to, it shouldn't be happening. And so in terms of prep, it really depends. Right now, for Like It or Not, I would say we probably do about, so I prep the material, right? I prep like being ready to produce the show, but I'm not so much we've scaled down who does like the material, like what we're talking about, and who does X, Y, and Z. So I focus on just getting like all the pieces together. Once I know what the show's going to be, the hosts kind of focus on what they're going to want to talk about right now. And then, I'll make sure that I have everything together. It's not always together because time is sensitive. So when you're watching and the hosts are going, David, what's going on? That's because I didn't have my stuff together. And then afterwards, there's more than an hour. It's probably about 2.5 ish to get the podcast done, because now we're also broadcasting on local radio in St. Paul. So in St. Paul, Minnesota. So I have to, they have, not only do they have restrictions on, you can't curse on radio, but the hosts have been pretty good about that. It's more the time. They have I can't send them something more than about an hour long. So our hosts like to talk, and that means I have to pick and choose what's going to go into that hour and make it make sense, and make it, make sure that it's not like that there's not something that's like sticking out. If you've, clips. So like if you're chopping things up or anything like that, you need to make sure that it's like connected and all that. And so the podcast is probably the biggest lifter right now, especially because of the radio aspects.
Do you like that casual candidness? I feel like when the host talk to you on air and you chime in sometimes too and razz them or whatever. I feel like there's a level of transparency with the viewer and an honesty with the show. It makes me think that I can relate to you folks and that I can believe what you're saying the rest of the time, that this is your real opinion and that you are reporting on things because you care about it, not because it's
Right.
click-worthy or
Right.
whatever. But how do you feel about that as a producer? Are you like, "Don't mention my name, leave me out of it, just do your thing," or what? How do you feel?
Well, so I'll answer it in reverse. At one point, I was sort of like, I'm just in the background. I didn't know if I was gonna, if I was gonna end up, going back into a 9 to 5 kind of job, or it wasn't 9 to 5. The job that I had, it was more like all over the place, but one of an everyday job. So I didn't want to really like put my name out there, because sometimes it's hard. Like if people know what you're associated with, that type of thing, then it kind of stigmatizes you. But I got used to it, and I realized after a while that I was gonna try to like stay in this lane. So that part wasn't so bad. The ribbing from the hosts, I had to get used to, like, throwing some punches back, so that so that it wasn't all, a pile on.
Right.
But that, and when you're focusing on producing, they're just in the seat talking, yapping away. So it's a little bit, it's easier for them to have fun than it is for the producer to have fun. Um, it looks like you were about to say something.
Always. Well, and one thing I always ask my guest is, because these are podcast hosts who just decided to do this. Some people went to school for journalism and they still answered this question in unexpected ways. Do you consider yourself a journalist, and are you in journalism?
I'm in the I'm in the media space. I definitely don't consider myself a journalist. I guess this ties into your previous question that I didn't get through answering. So I definitely like the relaxed feel of most of the show. I'm a fan of the shows that I produce at the same time, right? So I when I first connected with Benjamin Dixon, I was a listener. I reached out to him after listening to his podcast. So it's kind of hard to separate the work from, I guess, consuming the content. Um, but I do like the more relaxed feel of it, because I think you not only do you feel like you connect, but I almost feel like it's more raw, and you get things that you might not get if it was more strictly produced, more just like a Q&A. When we have guests on, if we don't know the guests, it'll be more constrained and professional. But when if we have Olay on, forget it. Everything's
Right.
off, and it's just going to be like they're talking on the phone.
Yeah.
You might not hear certain things, but you get my drift. I do think as a consumer of news, I think that we're missing something in the journalist space. Like everyone, compares like CNN and Fox's to like the Cronkite era, and obviously that era is gone anyway. But I do think we're missing something in terms of like hard hitters for journalism, rather than just like sticking to the left and the right and the, uh, you know, D's versus R's and all that nonsense. We have a couple, and as much as I'm not a fan of mainstream. I think Mehdi Hassan has brought what we see in Europe to the U.S. to some extent, and I think we need. And Democracy now does it, but they're a little bit more. They're still cordial. They're not. They're not ready to rip the guest's head off. But I do think like that the realness and not and kind of pulling away from just being polite because you want them to come back. I think that kind of hurts if we don't have the realness and the rawness and the aggressiveness in holding people accountable. As far as journalism though, no, I'm not a journalist. I try to stay active when I can, so I will go to like protests if I'm able to, and be involved in the activism aspect. But I don't consider myself a journalist, and I know that a lot of the hosts that I work with do and don't, depending on, like Ben at one point referred to himself as a journalist, but then in your interview, I think he had already like started to feel like he was growing out of that space and moving elsewhere. So there's a lot of gray zones, but unless I'm reporting, I wouldn't think of myself as a journalist. I guess in the audio visual, I guess I could be like a video journalist in that sense, but I wouldn't call myself that.
Yeah, if memory serves, Ben referred to himself as an activist and said he wanted to do more activism. And you were mentioning that too. And we talk
Yeah.
a lot about media activism here. Do you think it's a fair expectation to have of your average podcast host to inspire boots on the ground, so to speak, or some level of action in the viewers,
I
or
guess
at
it
least
depends on
advocate for it?
advocate their subject matter. I think that comes naturally. I don't think that would be forced really, because if there's a podcast about something, then I think that they're going to be advocating for what have you. It's just like Twitch, because Twitch is very niche. So when you go onto Twitch, forgetting about the big streamers, but just like the smaller communities on there, they have like streams that are dedicated to housing rights, right, or and that sort of thing. So I think on the same standard, when you're listening to a podcast, I think wherever that podcast is focused on, you're definitely gonna hear advocating and focus to that effect. As far as the activism or exciting people, it probably depends on the person. I wouldn't feel like they're obligated to encourage you to be active, right? Some people might be more in the historian vein where they're just, teaching. So they may not, have that that energy to like give a call to action. They may just be the boring professorial type. But I think but I think all those roles, have their own effectiveness. I do think that there is a necessity to have call to actions. If we don't have anyone doing that, if we don't have anyone fitting that role, then what are we really doing, right? I mean, we can report all we want, but especially in the indie space, people are looking for, I don't want to say they're looking for change because change feels forever, we're just chasing it, but like some kind of action rather than just listening to the same old talking points and same old BS that's more or less a sport. So I do think call to actions and actually like campaigns and getting somewhere with all of this is important.
I talk to people exclusively about this a lot, and what I've come to realize is that viewers, and I mean some of these channels have millions of viewers,
Hmm.
50,000 tuning in every day to watch a guy have lunch and
Hmm.
randomly talk about some stuff. A lot of people are looking for direction and for what to do next, and what to, you know, help me figure out what I should be doing, how I can get involved. And I think that they are happy to settle for what we call edutainment, where somebody's just making the information more digestible for them. And so I think you got to be doing one or the other. And
Yeah,
if you're doing
yeah.
edutainment, maybe occasionally showcase another indie news person
Hmm.
who's advocating for, labor organizing or registering to vote, whatever it is, But the you talked about the mainstream media. I wonder, what sort of insight do you have for how cable news is produced, and how is that different or the same to what you do? Like, is this because a lot of people in these situations are sort of like, well, I know what a talking head looks like thanks to cable news. So I know I have to sit here in front of a mic, look at the camera, have a little block up here with some video, right? I mean, we get that basis or that foundation from the mainstream media. But then it's
Yeah,
sort of, well, I can get away with a lot here because it's indie. But like,
right.
what's your, do you have a standard that's based on the mainstream media? Do you have any insight
Mm,
to how it's different or the same?
the only standards that I try to keep is in terms of truth, not being spinny and not presenting something in a way that I don't want, I don't want to be the left's Alex Jones.
Yeah, right.
So there are bare minimals, like in terms of like presenting something in a way that's what you would expect, because when people are looking at indie, they're still coming out of, for the most part, most people are still coming out of, they've been their brains have been trained to see something that looks like mainstream. So when I was when we were just getting started, when I was doing the Progressive Army work back in 2015, 2016, the video work was like, that's cringeworthy. When I've gone back and looked, and I've just been like, oh my, but you have to start somewhere, right? So
Yeah.
you're always not going to necessarily like what you've previously done, especially if it was really early on and you didn't know what you were doing. Um, but I do kind of, I want, when I'm working, I want what we're putting out to look legit so that it can be used in spaces, not mainstream, but spaces where the work is getting done. If we want to have activists on, they're going to want to know that they're being produced, they're being presented in a way that, people are actually tuning in. If you look sloppy, are people actually watching you unless you have the backing of, an official Twitch or YouTube contract? So I think that, you still have to look a certain way. You still have to, be welcoming the formality. But as far as insight into mainstream, not really at all. I know some people that have worked with mainstream, either on mainstream or behind the scenes, or know people that do, and it's all the type of thing that you would expect: producers and people and publicists, and getting your number in so that they call you back, and all that type of thing. It's not really having an in necessarily, unless you're someone that's not in mainstream and is getting pulled in. Like Ben's been on mainstream a couple times. He's been interviewed a couple times over the years, but it unless you're in that space, I think that you have to want to be in that space. And you may not get paid to be in that space. Not everyone that's just because you're showing up on CNN doesn't mean you're getting paid to be there, right?
Right.
So I think that having that knowledge, because not everyone is sold out. Some people just are taking advantage of the platform to get their product, their book, their message, their campaign, whatever out. Then there's the hosts that obviously are getting paid and they've sold out.
Right.
I think that, and now I'm saying this, and I know I'll absolutely never get a job at any of it, but that's okay. Otherwise, I would have gone to school and would have tried to get that flashy thing, but it's not about that. And even when I started out, it wasn't about that. It was about finding a lane where you could contribute, and I didn't think that I'd be doing it work wise, like to live, to have a roof over my head. Eventually it was kind of like, if I'm going to do the work, if I'm going to have time to do the activist side of it, it's going to have to be intertwined to some extent, because otherwise life has its demands and you just don't have the time to do things. And I knew that I wanted to be involved.
Well, so you are in this space where you're not relying on talking points, somebody telling you what to say, right? So I always ask, when it's a host, do you intend to change minds, or are you just putting the information out there for the viewer to do with what they will? But in this case, and I'm not asking you to spill a tea, but yeah, that's up to you. But are there moments where you disagree with a story or an angle on a story that the host has, and you're like, well, I'm just a guy producing, I don't have any say in this? Or what level of pushback can you give? And do
Yeah.
you guys ever shift each other's way of thinking on anything?
I definitely think, I've definitely said, I don't know if we should be hitting this tone, but at the same time, we're not following a script, right? On any of the things that I've worked on, there's not a script or talking points to the extent of we're not going outside of these lines, right? There's always been that freedom. So, I mean, if I was producing and someone was, and things were going into a direction, there was a trend, over the course of time. You said the show is pet friendly, right? Are you hearing that?
Absolutely. Yeah. We love
Stop
it.
it.
Yeah.
Lay down.
That's
No,
called Peanut
I'm
Gallery.
live on air. I got people watching. I can't come over and pet you. I'm sorry. Mike's that sensitive that it's coming through. They hear
That's
you.
great.
Do you want to come over?
What's your dog's name?
Joy. She's actually,
Oh,
I
nice.
kind of took her in. She's my mom's dog, but I've been long-term
Oh.
dog sitting.
Oh,
You're
great.
going to have to wait a little while. You got about 20 minutes. You can come over. So she's also extremely stubborn, where she won't move. She wants you to come over to her.
I love that.
And I can't bring the camera over, so you're just going to have to deal.
That's like the cat in her.
Yeah. What did you ask me? You asked me about tea and lines and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
I
I
mean,
definitely pushed back on subjects. I've
that's
definitely,
good, right? It's like, oh, we're in a space where we should be challenging each other, but is it
you might
ever?
have to do some audio work if she keeps crying, just so you know, to
Oh,
clean it
it's
up
okay.
later.
Don't worry.
Yeah, no, I've definitely pushed back, and if I don't think I would continue working in a space where I thought something was toxic, right? So if we were talking about something that was against a community, or whether it be the LGBTQ community, whether it be the Black community, whether it be the Jewish community, I think that if it was against my principles or philosophies or beliefs entirely, and it was consistent, like not just a one-off, I don't know if I wouldn't work in that space. But also people are allowed to disagree. So if there's a lot of there's a lot of different places people can go with their beliefs. I don't think everyone has to agree with me, and vice versa. Um, I mean, if I remember early on when we were building the Progressive Army blog, at one point we were talking about range of like ideas and what was allowed on the platform, and I misunderstood someone, and I said, "Are you suggesting that we have like pro-lifers on the platform?" And they were like, "No, no," and I was like, "All right," because that's the kind of line that I would like. It's one thing to have a debate with people. It's another thing to platform beliefs that are completely contrary to where we're trying to go.
Right. Okay, so what's your favorite aspect of your job? What's the best part?
Um,
Is
I
it
think
easier to
making
answer the worst part? No, I'm just kidding.
no, I think making I, I guess two things: making it happen, right? So like, I'm I mean, the host Ben could produce himself, but it wouldn't be the same type of thing because you're taking on multiple hats. So making it happen and actually having that out there and creating the community, creating the space. I'm proud that we do that. And that it's things have been thrown our way where we probably should have given up a couple times, but we don't, because the passion's there, and it's not just a job. We're in it because we want to be in it. And I guess that journey, that timeline that I kind of sped you through earlier, just the fact that I was able to, I'm content that I was able to find something that uses my strengths. That I was able to find a place that I could be involved, but also like it's not something that's outside of my comfort zone. I'm not doing this every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's this next question is kind of funny because I feel like I can almost answer this for you. I lately I've been asking people, would you rather be president or advisor to the president? But you're a producer. Doesn't that mean you'd rather be advisor?
Yeah, no, without a doubt. I would never want to have that. Like, no. Because I wouldn't want to be president. I wouldn't want to be an elected official. I'm not the type to speak or anything like that. So it's funny because whenever I push on subjects, even with family, like my brother and I constantly go at things. He's at this point, he's an independent. He no longer belongs on the right. So the party has left him, just like so many others. So we'll constantly go at it, and he'll ask me, then why don't you go run for office? Because that's not my. Everyone has a lane, right? And that's definitely not mine. I stay behind the scenes.
Yeah. But
And advising's easy, right? Telling people your thoughts or what you think is right. It's right. It's easy to give your opinion. If you know the fact, it's better.
yeah,
Got
but
in the camera there.
when the whole world is looking at you and waiting with bated breath for that one decision, and then the president looks to you and says, "What do you think?" That's monumental. Like
Well,
people
yeah,
think about
that's
maybe
true.
it'd be easier, but I don't know.
But then think about being the person that has to take in those opinions and then make the decision.
That guy's
Like, right?
thinking about living in Martha's Vineyard for the rest of his days. That's what
Uh,
he's thinking about.
well, yeah, but I mean, right now, like for example,
Mhm.
there are certain things that I don't believe when we get reporting out of the media. But even before we had like the leaked memos recently out of the Dissent channel, is what they call it, out of State Department, it was impossible for me to believe that everyone was on board with how this administration is dealing with the crisis in the Middle East right now, with the
Yeah.
treatment of the Palestinian people. There's like, it wasn't possible in my mind that at least one person, whether they were mid-level or not, or higher or lower, was good with what was going on. So as much as I don't believe everything that comes out, because there's always, like anonymous sources, and not that those anonymous sources are legit, they just won't talk if they're going to be named. But like, I think reporting is there's always a spin in a lot of the outlets, and they'll they might use milder language than so that it's presented in a certain way. But when we heard that the State Department is essentially split, and there's like some real infighting going on, that's the type of thing that like you can't make up, because normally they wouldn't even report on that type of thing. The administration wants to seem like it's together, no matter whose administration it is. They don't want dissent in their ranks.
That's interesting. Is this your dream job? Like, let's say your livelihood and financials did not depend on, like, it didn't matter. You could do
Right.
whatever you wanted. What else would you do, or would you just keep doing this?
I think I would definitely stick with this in some way, shape, or form. I definitely would have to, like, whatever I do, especially if everything else was asked for. Do you want to come into the camera and cry to everybody else? Because I can't.
I've been
step
watching
away.
her. I interviewed Sam Cedar. He was in Brooklyn with a window open. That video got 15,000 views. So I do not sweat background noise at all.
Well, Sam Cedar's gonna get, yeah. You might be the star, and I know you don't like attention, so she's very antisocial.
She's just wondering who you're talking to, if not
No,
her.
she wants to know why I'm not hanging out with her at this time.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Well,
it's her internal clock, but she'll deal with it. She'll deal for a little while longer.
so you would really keep doing this, huh? That's great.
Yeah, and honestly, I would want whatever. If everything else was accounted for, without a doubt, I'd want to be involved in working towards something, right? And I'm definitely at odds with I had a tumultuous childhood, but most of my family were probably more in the Reagan vein. There are some aspects that were more towards the corporate left, but if there's such a thing as corporate left, more like middle, but the left in this country. And so like there was always news around me and opinions around me and that type of discussion around me. I kind of went off the cliff as opposed to everybody else in terms of my ideology, but it was always going to be there. And then just my personality, when I'm looking at the chat and how the dog's dominating the chat right now.
I told you, pet-friendly show.
I am not a bad owner. I am not depriving her of anything. She's good. It's all right. But I would it's my personality that I see these problems and I'm like, there's got to be a way to fix these. Things that aren't right, we shouldn't have to accept, right? The way they are.
Yeah.
And so it's just in me that the fight's never going to it's never going to end, and we're always pushing forward, but there's got to be sitting back and just being one of those people that I don't vote because nothing's going to change whether I vote or not. No, the only way things are going to change is if we're actually doing something. And being behind a computer and a keyboard isn't the answer either. If it's just us in the indie media space sitting here, behind a mic, that's not going to change very much either. It does take the masses, and it does take people together doing things, taking action. What we see, if not now, doing right now, protesting because of the Middle East. And I'm sorry I keep bringing that up. I've just been kind of I've been consumed by the Middle East for the past I've literally been just drowned. I haven't been able to pull myself out of it. But I think that type, we there's nothing if there isn't actual action, and we've kind of lost touch. We've lost the understanding or the need for civics and for engagement, which is it's part of that manufactured consent. I think I saw people talking about that in the chat earlier. And we're the majority of the country, more people don't vote than do, and that's the very bare minimum. It's not even really civics voting. It is, but it's not enough, and we've just all been consumed by gadgets and tech and distractions and life, because capitalism has us it's taking all of our time, so we don't have time to do what either we want to do or is important. Um, so yeah, I think that I would always want to be involved and pushing towards. Um, you are right in the middle of the camera. They all see. They all know that you're not happy and that I'm to blame.
Yeah, I love this dog more and more every second.
She's very stubborn. She will sit there and she doesn't cry. She knows whistles.
She's so cute. Yeah. Okay, I got a couple
Yeah.
of random questions.
Yeah, stop me from rambling.
Well, but you're talking about being overwhelmed by current affairs in the Middle East, and this is affecting all of us, even if you don't watch. It's just knowing that these atrocities take place every couple of seconds is daunting. So how do you unplug? What do you do when it becomes too much?
I think there's been twice now that I've been like, I'm not looking at my phone for the rest of the night. But
And stare at the ceiling, or what do you
no,
do?
I
Go
turned something
outside?
on. I went to my vices, and just kind of like forced myself to get distracted.
Mhm.
Uh, assuming that you want to keep this clean of like substances and different things.
No, I
But
get you. Yeah, no.
yeah. So, and I don't drink, like I very rarely drink. And that definitely wouldn't be the course to take anyway, because yeah, you got to drink with people, right? But
Right.
I think that, it's really hard to unplug, especially when part of what you do just for work or for anything else, activism, what have you, you stay plugged in because you have to see everything. You look so miserable back.
She looks like she's waiting. She's like, this guy's
She
gonna say
is.
something about
As soon as
comics
I
and
take this
wrap it
out,
up.
she's gonna jump on the bed.
Yeah.
And I still have to eat dinner. I don't know what you're doing. But you are gonna be the star of this interview, just so you know.
Well, do you think because
so
you look at like
yeah,
it's
keep me focused. It's hard to unplug. It really is. But I had to
well,
force myself to unplug, because if I'm watching things, especially at the speed that they've been going for the past month plus, it's not good for our health. You know, like digesting it 24 hours a day. I think before technology, there's a reason that there was only an hour of news a day, and plus the newspapers.
I like to ask people, do they believe we're alone in the universe? Because I think about that a lot. And I think of it in terms of two things. If they're anything like us, I hope we are alone in the universe, and because we don't need more of this. And if
Come here.
the existence of alien life doesn't mean that we get healthcare and that we still have to go to our BS 9 to 5 jobs for minimum wage, I don't care if we're alone in the universe. So it's like either I hope we're not, or I hope we are if they're like us, or I don't care. And it's just like I can't help but bring our current situation into literally any question that somebody brings up. Like this
Yeah.
is where we are. It's a front
Yeah.
lines world, man.
Yeah.
This
No.
is where we are. Checking
I mean,
out or unplugging isn't really.
No. I mean, even when you think you're unplugged, your mind, there's still somewhere something
You are
that
actively
Yeah.
trying to forget the stuff you don't want to think about, which means you're thinking about it.
Yep.
Right?
No, absolutely. And as far as if we're alone, I just don't believe it's plausible that we're alone, especially if the universe is infinite. Hello, infinite content. I don't think that we are. I don't think there's a possibility. They may be really far away, and they may be a life form that we can't conceive of. Like we have Star Trek and Star Wars and all these other sci-fi shows, but that's coming out of the human brain, right? So I think that they're, in all likelihood, they could be just like us. They might be something that we have like we just can't even think of. We can't imagine it. But I don't think it's I think it's very, very selfish and small-minded for us to think that we're the only life form. Maybe we're the last, but not the only.
That's a new take. I haven't gotten that reply yet. That's
How
interesting.
old is the universe? So there's definitely been,
Okay, so the way I unplug is I just read endless comic books. And you were talking about art. Have you ever and making art, have you ever read comics?
I have. I wasn't a hardcore fan. I wasn't like it was only like probably. I mean, I was really only into it a few years in, I guess, like late middle school, early high school.
Hmm.
But I was a big Spider-Man fan. Um, mostly, mostly Marvel, and a little bit of DC, but mostly Marvel. Um, and then when the movies came out, I mean, that's a great escape. That I mean, even though
Yeah.
they still they sneak in real world stuff in there, but I think I think it also involves community because everyone's not everyone, but a lot of people are paying attention to that stuff. So it also allows everyone to escape together to some extent.
That's
How
the
did you
greatest
get into
thing.
comics?
Oh, how did I?
How
I
did you?
overcame my fear of my grandparents' attic. There's this scary
Nice.
attic at the top of the staircase with a door.
And they had comics hidden away.
Well, I didn't know what was up there, but turns out there was 2 boxes of, like, Silver Age comics from the '60s and '70s, and I just flipped
Nice.
out, and that was it. I was instantly hooked, instantly. And then every day since then, I've been reading comics. Um, and one of the reasons why I like to end these interviews by recommending a comic to my guests is
Yeah.
because a lot of people, like, Crystal Ball isn't reading comics, right? And people have like an idea of what comics are, like you were saying, Spider-Man, DC, or Marvel. And I like to explain to them, or at least show them, that it can be a lot more than that.
It can.
Like
There's yeah.
I recommended a comic to Senator Nina Turner about labor organizing and the history of unions, and she had no idea I was going to present that to her, right? And so I said, really, it's the kind of book that you would probably just have around and then give it to somebody that you were trying to educate on unions, because it's a perfect visual aid. It's all there. It's a juxtaposition of words and images. So what I wanted to recommend to you tonight is
Hmm.
something that I already put this on my Discord, and one of my hardcore comic book fan viewers was like, I had no idea this existed. So I'm trying to present something to you that, just if anything, to show you something that you might not be aware of, and this could really take your mind off everything else too if you check it out.
I'm game.
You're familiar with Anthony Bourdain?
Yeah.
Did you know that he made comics?
No.
Yeah, it's called Anthony Bourdain's Hungry Ghost. It's a bunch of ghost stories and horror stories. Now,
That'll have that Anthony the cook, the chef, right?
yeah. So they all have to do with food, and it's diff because he traveled the world, so it's different ghost stories from around the world.
Huh.
And and he was like a writer and everything, and he wrote fiction, he wrote nonfiction, and so he would think of these stories like, you know what, these would make great comics. And so, right toward the end of his life, he was publishing these comics, and you can get a collection of them. It's real horror, so it's intense. Like, you gotta be a horror fan, because
Hmm.
sometimes you're like, "Oh my god," right? Like,
But
it's
reading horror is different than watching horror too.
yeah, and
Yeah.
well, and like now it's open to interpretation from a bunch of different comic book artists, because there's a lot of top level comic art going on in this book. It's so here's how they sell it. Hungry Ghost is cooked up by the best-selling author and veteran chef Anthony Bourdain of Kitchen Confidential and all his Emmy award-winning Parts Unknown and all those shows, and acclaimed novelist Joel Rose, who wrote a book called Kill Kill Faster Faster.
I'm
And
familiar.
a ton of different artists, like I was saying, including like Paul Pope, who's a very well-known comic book artist. Not easy to get him on a project that he isn't writing and drawing himself, so it's kind of a big deal. And that's just one of the big names. So anyway, it's a great book. I remember thinking like, maybe this is a cash grab. I read the first issue, and I was like, okay, this is
I'm gonna
not
have
a
to check it
cash
out.
grab.
I'll
It's
have to check
authentic.
it out.
Now you can get the collected edition, and I never recommend books that are unaffordable or hard to get. Um, and you don't have to read, it's like with DC, I can't recommend a comic that now you got to read 12 different titles to know what's going on at all.
Got it. It's a
And it's
standalone type of
monthly.
thing.
Just one thing. You can just go out and get it.
Cool.
It's
I
called
will check it
Anthony
out.
Bourdain's Hungry Ghost. So check
Hungry
it out.
Ghosts. All right.
Is there
I'm gonna.
anything? What? Go ahead.
I was gonna. Well, I'll return the favor, sort of.
Oh, okay.
It's not widely available yet because it's still in the works. And episode 1, which is out, is going to get taken down because we have to change the order and republish it. But I'm actually working on a podcast that is heavily inspired by Grant Morrison.
Okay. How come I'm not involved in this?
Well, I mean, we might need to. I might. I'll talk to you. We'll see if there's
Well,
like a.
I was just kidding, but if I can be of assistance,
Yeah, no,
I owe
I
you
mean,
one.
because
So
I
please.
didn't consider the fact that you probably have a wealth of knowledge in the area. We actually got so it's called HYPERSIGIL,
Okay.
which if you're familiar with some of his methods and
Yeah.
yeah. So it's still political, but it's basically feeds off the idea of how false narratives or just narratives in general that aren't reality are made into our political reality.
Wow. Cool. Okay. Interesting. Wow.
So
All right.
we're only about 2 episodes into production, but there's already a podcast page for it, HYPERSIGIL, and so it'll be coming out eventually.
If you want to share a link with me, I'll put it in the description of this podcast. And everybody should check out Like It or Not. Follow David
Yeah,
on
definitely
Twitter.
follow Like It or Not. HYPERSIGIL is going to be a slow grind, but I felt like since we were talking comics a little bit, it was
Sure,
worth
absolutely.
bringing up.
Is there anything else you want to plug?
No, I'm good. I'm just happy to share the time with you, and you're always fun, Matt.
Hey, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you being here. This was awesome. It's just what I wanted. We got tons of awesome behind the scenes stuff. I saw in the chat, Infinite was saying this is actually really informative.
Oh, then I'm glad I made it because I was hesitant. I'm not gonna lie. It's not a producer's forte, but if it's just a chat and not a then I'm good with it. You know?
And I'll put it this way: come back anytime. It's on you now.
No pressure.
Yeah.
I'm pulling up the link so you can share with your Discord later on because I have to get it.
Cool. Okay. Well, thanks for being here again. I really do appreciate the time, and I want to thank everyone else for watching. We'll be back here Wednesday night with Jackson White at 8 p.m. Eastern, and until then, Mondays are back.